Hi everyone, and welcome to Lobo and Bobo's gaming channel. This is Gradius 3.
Is it just me, or is there just a deluge of retro-styled indie games being released? I mean, I think it's charming that you have games that are meant to look like they're 8-bit or 16-bit by design, but come on, I mean, every other game that's released, when it was Fez and Super Meat Boy, it was really interesting. But it's getting a bit old now, so, you know, please, let's have something new. Or we could go back to the source material and compare and see how these retro games actually did look. Gradius 3 is as good a game as any to do that, simply because indie developers, they tend to emulate this sort of style. If you want an example of that, you can check out my review of Gradius Rebirth, which is exactly that. Konami emulating their own style from the 16-bit era in a modern game, or at least a game released on a relatively modern system, the Wii. But what you're looking at now is Gradius 3 for the Super Nintendo played on a Wii. At the time of making this video, it's been 25 years since this game was first released, as it was a launch title for the Super Nintendo in North America. It's based on the arcade version of Gradius 3, which was released a couple of years before. A game which I consider near unplayable because of its incredible difficulty. The Super Nintendo version is much more accessible to mere mortals like me. I think it's nice to be able to see what's in the game beyond level 1 and level 2. That being said, there is no Gradius game which is easy to complete by today's standards. The thing that stands out about Gradius 3 on the Super Nintendo, which has been pointed out in nearly every video review of the game, is the immense amount of slowdown that happens when there is a lot of moving objects on screen. Now, I have to be honest, I try to use this to my advantage when I play this game, as it can be quite helpful. Especially if you're facing a boss, which is filling the screen with murderous pixels out to kill you. Another thing that makes Gradius 3 unique among Gradius games is the weapon system. For the first time, you're allowed to pick and mix and set up your weapon upgrades as you like. This adds a nice element of strategy, but also quite a bit of replay value. But none of that is the real attraction here. This game has a timeless feel to it. Overlooking the technical stumbles in the game, it feels almost like it could have been released today. With all the retro-style indie games flooding the market, Gradius 3 would not look out of place among them. I think it would put most of them to shame. The graphics are bright and colourful, the music is very good, and the controls are smooth and responsive. The plot isn't really there, which is exactly what you're looking for in this type of game. Now, you'll be playing this on a Nintendo system, which means that you'll have a proper D-pad. There are people who play Gradius games with analog sticks, much in the same way as there is people who put pineapple on pizza. There's no multiplayer in Gradius 3, so you can forget about that. However, this is the type of game which is really fun to watch if we're talking about a skilled player. The rules for survival are simple as in any Gradius game. You need to power up your ship as soon as possible and then avoid getting hit, as this will remove all of your upgrades. The penalty for dying in Gradius 3 on the Super Nintendo isn't nearly as harsh as in the other games in the series though, so it makes it tolerable. But it's not the type of game you're playing if you're having an off day, or right before you go to bed, as it seems to speed up your brain activity. If you go up against Super Mario World, then you're in for some tough competition. So I think Gradius 3 suffered quite a bit from being a launch game, as it was probably overshadowed by Mario. And there are other space shooters for the Super Nintendo which are far better known than this. UN Squadron seems to be a lot more popular, as does Axlay, which makes Gradius 3 a bit of a hidden gem in my eyes. The fact that the game is an arcade port also means that there are no fancy Mode 7 or rotation or scaling effects, which were really strong selling points back in the day. So Konami included things like that in Axlay, which was developed from the ground up for the Super Nintendo. So it's a bit ironic that Axlay feels like the more dated of the two when you compare it to Gradius 3. I can imagine hardcore shoot-em-up fans dismissing Gradius 3 for the Super Nintendo as being too easy and dumbed down. And I guess they have a point, but if you have to choose between this and the near unplayable arcade version, I know which one I'd go for. I should mention that you can get ports of the arcade version for the PS2 and the PlayStation Portable. The latter is covered in my video review of Gradius collection for the PSP. In conclusion, I think that Gradius 3 for the Super Nintendo has a lot going for it, and is better than the arcade version in a number of ways. It allows people without godlike skills to experience the content in the game. It plays smoother and it looks and sounds better. It's easier and less expensive to obtain a copy of this than the arcade ports, and it shows you what type of games people got as third-party launch titles for the SNES. But perhaps most importantly, I think that Gradius 3 feels really fresh even today. I tend to get a little bit disappointed when I play games from the SNES era that I'm nostalgic about. Usually they're simply just not as good as I remember them to be. Not so with Gradius 3, which is why I think it's a hidden gem, and is why I think you should play it. Just be prepared for a bit of frustration when you reach the high speed tunnel. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.